For 7 straight years, I cared for my grandson with everything I had. I wasn't looking for praise or a show of it all. I just did what needed to be done, day in and day out. I rocked him to sleep. I paced the floor through fevers and nightmares. And then, one day, my daughter-in-law looked me straight in the eye and said, "We need our own space now." Just like that, I was gone. No fanfare, no thank you. With a bruised heart and my pride barely intact, I sold the only apartment I owned in the city and moved back to the country to live with my sister. I told myself I needed peace. That maybe, just maybe, it was time to start living for myself. But peace? It lasted less than a season. The phone rang on a humid afternoon. It was my son. "Hey, Mom, could you come help with Tyler this summer? He really misses you." A pause. "Oh, and while you're here, could you help me pay for his summer camp? It's about $5,000. $5,000? So now I was not only the on-call nanny, but also their personal ATM. They truly believed I sold my home to finance their lives. Not this time. This story was being rewritten, and I was flipping the script. That night, during dinner, the air felt uncomfortable, like a pot left on the stove too long, hissing with heat and the acrid smell of something about to burn. Claire, my self-proclaimed capable and intelligent daughter-in-law, poked at the green beans on her plate with the tip of her fork, her brow furrowed as if she were trying to crush the vegetables with sheer disdain. "Carol, did you rinse these well this time? Tyler has a sensitive stomach. You know he can't handle dirty food." She didn't raise her voice, but her words pricked like needles. I put down the bowl, a weight settling in my chest. I had soaked and scrubbed those vegetables twice. I had peeled them and cut off all the stems. What could possibly still be wrong? Before I could speak, she turned to Tyler. "Honey, is Grandma's food better? Or would you rather Mommy take you out to eat?" Tyler looked at her, then at me. "Grandma's food is good too," he mumbled. But his eyes were already taking sides. I felt a chill run through me. "Carol," Claire continued, softening her tone just enough, remembering that Mark, my son, was sitting right there. "Could you turn down the TV volume at night? We have to work early, and Tyler has school. That show you watch, it keeps us all up. I always went to bed and got up early. They were the night owls. It wasn't the first time our schedules had clashed, and I knew it wouldn't be the last." I turned to Mark, my son. He kept his head down, chewing, pretending not to hear a word. A fury grew inside me so fast it stole the breath from my lungs. "Claire," I snapped, my voice trembling. "I raised Tyler for 7 years, day and night. Do you really think I would do anything to hurt him? I'll turn down the volume, fine. But don't you dare twist things or lie." Mark finally looked up. "Mom, come on. Claire didn't mean it like that." His tone was light, as if he were smoothing over spilled milk. "She's just thinking about what's best for Tyler, for all of us. Can't we just be understanding?" Understanding? My hands were shaking. I have been understanding. I've done nothing but understand. I cook, I clean, I run errands. I watch your son from sunup to sundown, and this is what I get? Complaints about how I wash vegetables, that my television is too loud. Claire put down her fork, her lips curling into a slight, polite smile, a blade wrapped in silk. "Carol, it's not that we don't appreciate you. It's just that we feel it's time for us to have our own space. Tyler's growing up. He needs to develop his independence. We'd like to try handling things on our own for a while." Independence? What a clever little word to hide what they really meant. The truth was clear. I was no longer part of the picture. I was the clutter they needed to clear away. For 7 years, I revolved around their little family like a spinning top until I lost my sense of self. And now, worn out, they wanted to discard me like an outdated piece of furniture. I gave them my warmth, and they only felt the heat too much, too close, too uncomfortable. After that night, the house changed. It was as if someone had muted the music. Mark and Claire moved in sync, avoiding me with the grace of a practiced routine. We used to sit together after dinner, chatting about our day and watching a little TV. Now, they would clear their plates and vanish into their rooms. Or they'd take Tyler for a walk, without me. I was left in that empty living room, whispering to myself in front of a screen, like a ghost trying to pretend it still belonged among the living. They weren't just ignoring me. They had demoted me. I was no longer a grandmother. I was background noise. Or worse, furniture that creaked too much. I tried to reach out to Tyler, offering to read him a story and build a block tower. But he pulled away, his gaze uncertain and wary. "Mom says I have to learn to play by myself now," he said. "I shouldn't depend on you all the time." That sentence carved itself into my heart like a sword. Children don't know how to lie. They only repeat what they're taught. And Claire? She had handed him the knife herself. That night, something inside me froze. The warmth in my chest began to harden, turning cool, and then colder still. That night, I lay wide awake in the narrow twin bed of the small guest room. I couldn't fall asleep. From the master bedroom next door, I could hear muffled voices, Mark and Claire whispering quietly, carefully, measuredly. I couldn't make out the words, but I didn't need to. That quiet, contained cadence was enough. I was already on the outside. I turned to the nightstand. There was a small photo, Tyler as a toddler, his cheeks round and beaming, smiling mischievously right at the camera. The tears came fast, hot, and relentless. A few nights later, Mark was at my door. He knocked, soft as a pang of regret. He wrung his hands, his gaze darting everywhere but at me. "Mom," he said, clearing his throat, as if he were about to deliver good news. "You've worked so hard all these years. We thought maybe it's time for you to rest. To really rest." I didn't say a word. I just looked at him. He hesitated, choosing his next words like he was arranging flowers at a funeral. "Claire and I talked, and, well, we think maybe it would be best if you moved back to the country, or found your own little place nearby. You know, somewhere quieter. Our schedule is so behind lately, and we don't want to disrupt your sleep. Quiet, for my own good, so I could rest." What a beautiful coat of paint for what was really just an eviction. They weren't thinking about my rest, they just didn't want to see me anymore. What they really wanted was for me to disappear from their daily life, clean and quiet. And just like that, something inside me went cold for good. There were no shouts, no slamming doors. Because sometimes the heaviest sound in the world is the silence that comes after you give up. I said nothing that night. The next morning, I started to pack. There wasn't much. Some clothes. My medications. A few toiletries. I stood in the living room and looked around one last time. Tyler's little certificates were still pinned to the wall. His tiny socks, washed and hung by me just yesterday, swayed gently on the balcony line. Every corner whispered of how much I had given. And now, none of it belonged to me. In the kitchen, I picked up the apron I had worn for years. It still held the faint smell of oil and garlic, a mark of everything I had done, everything they wanted to erase. I had hoped to say goodbye to Tyler with a hug, maybe say a few parting words. But when I came out, Claire was at the door, zipping up his coat. "Hurry, Tyler. We're late for art class," she said, not even looking at me. Her voice was cold and impersonal, as if she were talking to someone at a bus stop. Tyler glanced at me. There was a flicker of hesitation in his eyes, maybe even sadness. But mostly, there was confusion. He mumbled, "Bye, Grandma," and let her lead him away. The door slammed shut behind them. It wasn't just a noise. It was a verdict. My role in this family was officially over. Mark walked me downstairs. In the elevator, he said nothing. He would occasionally glance at me out of the corner of his eye and then look away quickly, like a schoolboy caught cheating on a test. In the lobby, he pulled a few crisp $100 bills from his wallet, 3, maybe 4, and pressed them into my hand. "Mom, just take this," he muttered, "in case anything comes up. And if you ever need anything, you can call me." I stared at the bills. At that moment, they felt like hot coals in my palm. I didn't take them. I didn't say a word. I simply took my small suitcase and walked out without looking back. One step, then another, spine straight, a steady pace, not giving him a single chance for regret. This was not a defeat. It was not a surrender. This was dignity. Let them think they had discarded me. They would soon see that, without them, I would live perfectly fine. In fact, I would live better. When I stepped out of the building, the sky had already grown dark. Car headlights glittered on the streets. Neon signs flickered over the busy sidewalks. The city throbbed with life, restless, relentless. And yet, in all that movement, not a single space belonged to me. I stood on the edge of the curb, watching strangers pass by like waves. For the first time in my life, I felt like the world had moved on, without me. Where could I go? Only one place came to mind, that old apartment. The one my late husband and I bought with scraped-together savings. A small, worn place, but ours. After Mark got married, he invited me to move in with him and Claire. The apartment had been empty ever since. I had lived there alone for years, clinging to memories as if they were oxygen. But now, was I really going to go back? To sit alone between those cold, peeling walls and grow old in silence? I turned around and found the cheapest motel I could find in the area. The room barely had space to open my suitcase. The air was damp and pressed on my lungs. Mold crept in the corners of the ceiling. I lay on the creaky mattress, staring at the yellow water stains above my head. I couldn't sleep. What now? I reached under the pillow and pulled out my phone. My hands trembled as I dialed the only number that made sense, Susan. My sister. She had married into a quiet little town miles away. We hadn't seen each other in years. She answered after a few rings, her voice warm and groggy with sleep. Carol? What's wrong? Why are you calling so late? I wanted to laugh, to say something light, but the moment I opened my mouth, the tears came pouring out. I choked on every word, my voice breaking as the pain spilled out in pieces. It wasn't pretty. It didn't have to be. She understood everything. Wait, what? What did they do? Susan's voice sharpened, cutting through the static with fury. Mark has gone completely mad. And that Claire. What kind of person treats someone like that? Her fury was plain, but her voice didn't waver. Carol, don't you cry another minute, you hear me? Pack your things. Come, stay with me. We'll figure this out together. Her words lit a flame inside me, cutting through every shadow that had swallowed me whole. Of course, I still had my sister. When the call ended, I felt as though a light had been switched back on in my chest. I wasn't going back to that apartment. I wasn't going to sit there and wait for someone to need me again. That place, once my home, was now just a shrine to a life that no longer existed. It was my last emotional anchor, and it had become a shackle. Selling it wouldn't just get Mark and Claire's hands off it, it would set me free. The next morning, I called a real estate agency. The old apartment might have been run down, but the location was prime, just a stone's throw from the subway. The agent told me the market was booming, and with the right timing, it could fetch a good price. As I signed the sales agreement, my fingers trembled a little, but inside, I felt a serenity I hadn't known in years. This money, this decision, wasn't for them. It was for me. For the first time, entirely for my future. The sale went through quickly. In less than a month, the buyer signed, and the paperwork was complete. When the funds hit my account, not a fortune, but more than enough to get by for the next few years, I finally exhaled. I didn't tell Mark. I didn't tell Claire. They had no idea the apartment had a new owner. They had no idea the money was sitting quietly in an account under my name. That money was my last secret and my last piece of armor. I began to plan carefully. I put a portion of it into a fixed-term deposit, not touching a single penny. That was my non-negotiable safety net. The rest I kept liquid for essentials, for whatever the next chapter held. Then I bought a bus ticket to a small town in Maine. As the bus pulled away from the city, I watched the skyline blur into a smudge of steel and neon. The crowds at the subway entrance, the flashing lights of the stores, the glass towers I used to see daily. It all faded into the distance, becoming just background noise. I didn't know what was waiting for me at the end of the road, but I knew one thing for sure: I would never go back to that house. It was like escaping a cage, bitter, strange, strangely liberating. Like finally uncorking a bottle you'd kept sealed for half a lifetime, only to realize the taste inside was a mix of every emotion you never let yourself feel. Relief, regret, a little fear, but also peace. Hours later, the road wound through rolling green hills. The air changed. It smelled of pine needles and damp earth, clean, fresh, alive. I felt like something invisible was reaching out and gently easing the knots in my chest. The bus pulled into the small town transit station, and there she was, Susan, standing by the platform, hands in her coat pockets, her eyes scanning the windows. She looked a little older than I remembered, a few more silver strands in her hair, but her smile, bright, wide, steady, was exactly the same. "Carol," she called, already moving toward me. The moment she hugged me, I broke down, like a lost child finally finding home. I buried my face in her shoulder and wept. 7 years of exhaustion, humiliation, and resentment, it all poured out in that one embrace. Every disappointment, every sleepless night, every moment spent alone in someone else's house, trying not to breathe too loudly. She held me tight and rubbed my back gently. "You're here now. That's all that matters," she whispered. "It's over. You've got me. You're not alone anymore." Her voice was like the mountain wind, clean, steady, and sure. We drove to her house, a cozy 2-story cottage on the edge of the woods. In the front garden, tomatoes, green beans, and corn grew in neat rows. A few chickens strutted across the lawn as if they owned the place. The house wasn't fancy, but it was bright and spotless. Everything had its place. Everything carried her touch. There was even a jar of homemade blueberry jam by the window, catching the last golden rays of the afternoon Sunday. I stood at the doorway and inhaled deeply. The air smelled of earth and fresh grass. A wind chime tinkled softly under the porch eaves. In the distance, a rooster crowed, and in that moment, I finally felt still. The city lights may shine bright, but they never brought me comfort. Here, the ground was plain, but solid under my feet, and for the first time in a long, long time, I felt like I belonged. Life in the country was slow and honest. Every morning, I woke not to the roar of traffic, but to the sound of birds outside my window and the bickering of chickens and ducks in the yard. Gone were the jarring alarms, the glare of concrete, and the suffocating noise. Now, the day began with sunlight filtering through the trees and the scent of earth on the breeze. During the day, Susan and I would work side by side in the vegetable garden, weeding, watering the rows of greens, and pruning the leaves. Watching those tender green shoots grow a little taller each day, I felt something inside me begin to take root again. We kept a few hens, and every morning we'd bring in fresh, warm eggs nestled in the straw. Susan even taught me how to bake bread in a wood-fired oven. That smell of golden crust, smoke, and yeast was something I had never known in the city. Every so often, we'd drive to the town market for a few supplies. We'd run into neighbors and chat with old friends. Some I didn't even know, but they all greeted me with the same warm, relaxed cheer, like the sunlight here, humble but full of warmth. Sure, the work left my muscles aching, but at night, I slept. Deeply. No dreams. No nightmares. No cold silences. No weight pressing on my chest like it used to back in that old home. Here, people spoke plainly, sometimes even a bit rough, but with sincerity. Much better than the shallow smiles and sugar-coated half-truths I had grown accustomed to in the city. The old man next door would show up at our gate with freshly caught trout. Another neighbor would bring over hot cornbread wrapped in a dish towel. "Eat up," she'd say. "If you want more, I'll make another batch." And somehow, those simple words healed more than any apology ever could. Susan and I would often sit on the wooden bench in the garden, shelling green beans as the sun set behind the hills. One afternoon, as we were shelling peas into a metal bowl, she looked over and asked, "Any plans now that you're settled in?" I smiled, looking out at the patch of land just beyond the porch. "Well, first things first. I want to fix this place up, make it a bit more comfortable to live in." I paused, my thoughts already taking shape. As for the rest of that money, I've been thinking, what if we started something small? The air is clean, the land is good. Maybe a small farm stay? Or we sell the vegetables and pickles we grow right here? Nothing big, just enough to keep us busy. Susan's eyes lit up instantly. I've been wanting to do that for years. I just never had the money to start. But now, between the two of us, we could make something really successful. Seeing her light up like that, I felt steady for the first time in a long time. Back in the city, I spent every day revolving around Tyler's after-school snack, Mark's moods, and Claire's whims. I was a frayed thread, pulled in every direction, never allowed to hold my own shape. But now I was tending to the land. And here, if I planted something, I knew exactly what I would get in return. Just when life was starting to feel stable again, the peace was shattered by a single phone call. Caller ID, Mark. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, my heart clenching in that familiar, heavy way. Then I walked to the far end of the yard, out of Susan's sight. I took a deep breath. I pressed accept. "Hey, Mom." His voice sounded strange, too casual, too forced. "Hi, honey," I said calmly. He made small talk for a bit, not asking how I was, not mentioning my departure. He wasn't calling to check in. He was calling to ask for something. "So, is everything good over there? Are you doing okay, financially?" "I'm fine," I said evenly. "I don't spend much." "Oh, that's good." There was a pause. Then came the real reason. "Hey, about that apartment, the one you used to have. Did you sell it?" I smiled faintly. Still quiet. Still serene. "Yes. I sold it." "How much did you get for it?" he asked too quickly, trying and failing to sound casual. Inside, I laughed coldly. But my tone stayed light. "Not much. Just enough for Susan and me to get by. Fix up the old house. Don't worry, I won't be a bother to you." Silence. I could practically hear him trying to process the disappointment. A few seconds later, he tried again, his voice low and hesitant. "Mom, things are just really tight right now. Tyler's school expenses are piling up and..." I cut him off. "You and Claire need to learn to manage your finances. My money is already secured. I'm not touching it. At my age, I need to make sure I have something for myself. You understand, right?" "Yeah," he said quietly. And just like that, the call ended. I stood in the yard, phone in hand, looking at the distant hills. The wind carried the scent of earth and pine. But there was no peace in my chest. I knew this was just the beginning. They weren't going to let go that easily. Soon after, Susan must have noticed my face. She came over and tapped my arm lightly. "Mark called, didn't he?" "What did he want this time?" I told her everything. She slapped her thigh, furious. "Didn't I tell you they were after your money? Carol, don't you dare go soft again. They'll have you wrapped around their finger in a heartbeat." I nodded slowly. My vision was starting to sharpen. To them, the house money wasn't mine. It was just a pending inheritance. They spoke sweetly, but they only saw an account they could tap into at any time. And sure enough, the next move didn't take long. Only this time, it came wrapped in a new disguise. Tyler, Grandma. His voice was soft, familiar, hesitant, like the sound of old memories pulling at my heartstrings. That one word hit me hard. 7 years of story times and snacks, bandages and bedtime hugs. That kind of bond doesn't break easily. I tried to keep my voice gentle. "Hey, Tyler, you miss Grandma, huh?" "Yeah, I miss you," he said, his voice thick with a sniffle. "Grandma, when are you coming back? I want to play with you again." I fell silent for a moment, my heart twisting with too many emotions to name. "Was that really him, oh?" I asked carefully. "Sweetheart, did Mommy or Daddy ask you to call me?" Silence, just his breathing, then a whisper, barely audible. "Yes, Mommy said if you come back, we can go to the amusement park, and you'll help me pay for robot camp." And just like that, something broke inside me. Clean. Final. So that was it. Still the same game. Still the same playbook. They were using him, his innocence, his love, as a prop, turning him into a soft-voiced envelope for their next fundraising campaign. They wanted me to pay again. To pay for love. To pay to be missed. To pay for a spot in a family that never wanted me to stay, only to serve. But not this time. Never again. I wouldn't fall into the same trap twice. I composed myself, smoothing the tremor from my voice. "Grandma misses you too, sweetie. When I can, I'll come visit. But you be a good boy, okay?" After I hung up, my hand was still clenched around the phone. That last vestige of warmth I held onto, that emotional thread connecting me to them, had been snapped, worn out by a call with all the sincerity of a rehearsed script. A few days later, Mark called again. This time, there was no small talk, no beating around the bush. He went straight to the point, with the breezy assumption of someone who had already decided the answer had to be yes. "Mom, summer is coming up. Claire and I both have work, and, well, there's really no one to look after Tyler. Could you come and help out for a bit? He keeps saying he misses you." I almost laughed, but all that came out was a slow, dry tone. "Oh, really? Help out?" I drew out the words deliberately. "If I come back, where am I supposed to stay? Last I heard, there wasn't any room at your place." There was a pause. He hadn't expected that. Then came the clumsy attempt at diplomacy. "Well, yeah, the apartment is a bit small. But maybe, I don't know, the couch? Just for a little while. Or you could rent something nearby? We could chip in for some of the rent?" The audacity. That offer rang so loud I could almost hear the clacking of Claire's calculator in her head 3 states away. They wanted me back, not as a guest, not even as family, but as a full-time, on-call nanny. No bed, no comfort, not even dignity. And I would have the privilege of paying for it myself, with maybe, just maybe, a partial subsidy for rent. Like I was some self-funded temp worker with a mop in one hand and a bank card in the other. The anger rose quickly, hot and sharp. My knuckles turned white as my nails dug into my palm, but I didn't show it. I couldn't. Giving them an explosion would have been a win for them. So I took a slow breath and let the fury settle back into its cage. Then I put on the softest, sweetest tone I could manage. "Of course, Mark," I said. "I'll get everything ready. I can't wait to see my grandson." I paused. "And about the camp fee, we'll talk about that in person. Let them think they'd won. Let them make their little plans. If they wanted my money again, fine. But this time, it would be on my terms." I told Susan everything, word for word. Mark's request. My decision. Every last detail. Her face flushed. She shot up from her chair as if she were ready to march straight to the city herself. "Carol, are you out of your mind? They're clearly trying to bleed you dry. You can't go." I gently pulled her back to her seat and placed a calm hand on hers. "Susan, relax," I said quietly. "I know exactly what I'm doing." My gaze sharpened. "This time, I'm not going back to be a nanny. I'm going back to collect." She blinked. "Collect?" I gave her a cold, humorless smile. "They like to play with numbers, don't they? Fine. Then let's sit down and really calculate how much this so-called family bond is worth. First step, lodging. They said there was no room for me, offered me the couch, suggested I pay for my own apartment. Fine, I'd play their game. We sat at the old kitchen table like we were planning a military campaign, mapping out every move, every line in the sand. With each detail, Susan's worry morphed into something else. Her eyes lit up. The fury that once clouded her face gave way to a sharp, electric excitement. "Yes," she slapped her thigh. "That's exactly what you should do. Let him know you're not his doormat anymore. I used to pour my heart into that family, hoping it would earn me love. All it earned me was exploitation. This time, I'd be smarter. Sharper." A few days later, I started preparing for the return trip. But not like before. No big bags filled with jam, or fresh tomatoes from the garden, or homemade cookies. No mental lists of who liked what, or what might make Claire smile for once. This time, I traveled light. Just some summer clothes. Essential medications. Nothing more. Because I learned something the hard way. No matter how much love you give, you can't force someone to love you back. All that effort, it only moved me. It never moved them. Before I left, I stopped by the local bank and withdrew $2,000 in cash. I divided it into neat bundles. I tucked each one into hidden pockets I had sewn inside my clothes. That was all I was bringing. The rest of the house money? It was already locked away in fixed-term deposits, safely guarded according to a plan Susan and I had agreed on. She knew exactly where the account book and safety key were. That was my armor. No one could touch it. And just to be safe, I looked her in the eye and said, "I'll write to you every night. If there's a single day you don't hear from me, don't wait. Call the police." She didn't flinch. "You have my word, Carol. If they lay a finger on you, I swear I'll be their worst nightmare." With her as my anchor, I finally felt steady. Ready. A few days later, I stood in front of Mark's door with nothing but a small carry-on suitcase in my hand. Claire opened the door. The moment she saw me, her face lit up with an over-the-top, sickly sweet smile that made me nauseous. "Carol, you're finally here. Come in, come in. Tyler has been asking about you non-stop." Mark got up from the couch, his smile mechanical, like a new mask he had just put on. "Hey, Mom, you must be tired from the trip." I nodded wordlessly and wheeled my suitcase straight into the living room. And there it was. The couch, already set up with neatly folded blankets and a pillow, as if they were welcoming discount royalty. Claire, in her most considerate tone, gestured toward it. "The house is just so tight right now, so we'll have to ask you to make do for just tonight, okay? Once Tyler is on summer break, you'll probably be tired from watching him all day, so get some rest." Every word was laced with sweetness, but the message was clear. Don't go into the bedroom. Don't make a sound. Don't get comfortable. But I didn't resist. I didn't flinch. I smiled pleasantly, set my suitcase on the floor and said, "Oh, I'm fine. It's no big deal." They both visibly relaxed. I could almost hear their sigh of relief, and that's when I struck. "But," I added casually, "my back isn't what it used to be. The couch is a little tight. Plus, I get up 2 or 3 times a night, lights on and off. I wouldn't want to disturb your sleep." I paused and watched their faces tighten like strings pulled too fast on a violin. I was thinking, there's a nice little motel just outside the complex. It's not too expensive. I could just stay there. That way I can look after Tyler during the day and head back at night. No interruptions. Everyone wins. My voice was soft and calm, but every word landed like a thumbtack on a marble floor. They wanted a free live-in nanny? Too bad. This nanny had options and pride. The room froze. This had not been planned. It wasn't part of their script. Claire was the first to recover, her voice rising a pitch. "A motel? Mom, that's so expensive. Why waste money like that? Sure, our place is small, but the couch works just fine. There's no need to spend on something like that." But it wasn't the money she was worried about. It was the control. If I wasn't under their roof, I wasn't at their beck and call. No summoning me to dinner, no guilting me into extra favors. It would be an inconvenience. "Oh, Claire," I said, still smiling. Then I turned to Mark. "It's just a motel. It's fine. I think I've earned a little comfort, don't you think?" I gave a little sigh and a shrug. The only thing is, I didn't bring much cash. It was all a bit last minute. So, the food, the motel, I let the sentence hang in the air. Their faces changed instantly. They got the message. You invited me, you cover the cost. The polite smiles vanished like smoke. Mark started fidgeting, his eyes darting between Claire and me, like a kid caught cheating on a test. Sweat beaded on his forehead. Claire's jaw was clenched, her lips pressed into a thin line. Her eyes narrowed into little sharp knives. The silence hung in the room, thick and oily. Finally, Mark spoke, his voice stiff. "Okay," he mumbled, pulling out his wallet and handing me a few crisp bills, about $500, for a few days. We'll figure it out later." Claire let out a sharp sigh through her nose and stormed off without another word. I accepted the money with a neutral expression, not letting a hint of satisfaction show. "Thank you. I'll go get settled," I said. "See you tomorrow. I'll be here at 8 o'clock sharp to start work." And without another glance at either of them, I rolled my suitcase to the door and walked out. The sun was shining. The breeze carried notes of fresh coffee and laundry soap from the corner laundromat. I walked down the block to a modest, budget inn and booked a room. It wasn't fancy, but the windows were bright, the bed was soft, and most importantly, no one was looking at me like I owed them something. I put down my suitcase and did the first thing I needed to do: call Susan. Step 1, complete. On the other end, she was practically banging on the table. "That's my sister. Show them who's boss." I hung up and sank onto the bed, exhaling deeply. Sunlight streamed through the window, warm and golden, a world away from the cold, hard couch they had prepared for me. But I knew better than to get comfortable. This was just the appetizer. The $5,000 robotics camp? Let's see what they really want. A mother? Or just the money? Exactly at 8 the next morning, I showed up at Mark's door, punctual as promised. It was Tyler who answered. "Grandma." His eyes lit up for an instant, with that pure, unfiltered joy only a child can offer, but then, just as quickly, it dimmed, as if he was calculating whether it was okay to be this happy. I reached out and gently ruffled his hair before stepping inside. Claire shuffled out of the bedroom, still in her pajamas, half yawning, forcing a smile that was more thorn than affection. "Oh, you're here," she said. I nodded, my tone neutral. "Has Tyler eaten yet?" She turned toward the kitchen. "Not yet. I was just about to make something." I didn't reply. I just sat down on the couch, turned on the morning news, and watched silently. A few minutes later, she appeared with 2 plates of a simple breakfast and set them on the table without a word. She glanced at me sideways, wanting to say something, but ultimately swallowed it. After breakfast, Mark and Claire were in a rush to leave, getting dressed in near silence. Just as she was zipping up her coat, Claire tossed a line over her shoulder. "Oh, Carol, make something light for lunch. Tyler's clothes are in the hamper. You can just run a load. We'll be back for dinner, so don't cook too late." I looked up, calm and unhurried. "Claire, I didn't sleep well at the motel last night," I said sweetly. "I guess I'm not used to the bed. I'm feeling a bit low on energy today." Then I smiled, still honey sweet. "I'll take Tyler out for a quick bite to eat. As for the laundry, I think you and Mark can handle that tonight." I agreed to help watch Tyler, not run your household. The air thickened. Her face faded like a slipping mask. Her lips parted, and her eyes narrowed as if she was about to bore something into my forehead. But then she saw Tyler standing there, watching. She bit her tongue, snapped her mouth shut, and slammed the door on her way out. And just like that, the rules changed. That day, I did exactly what I said I watched Tyler. Only that. We watched cartoons, built block towers, and went downstairs. As for cooking, cleaning, and laundry, untouched. For lunch, I took him to a little deli for sandwiches. When Claire came home early that afternoon, she opened the door and froze. The kitchen looked exactly as she had left it, dishes piled in the sink, bulging trash bags, and untouched countertops. Her face tightened on the spot. Before she could open her mouth, I cut her off with a soft murmur. "There, I've been dizzy all afternoon. I was just trying to keep Tyler relaxed, didn't want to risk overexerting myself. Every time she tried to drop a hint, maybe fold some laundry, the trash is getting full, I had a calm, unmovable answer ready. My back is acting up. The doctor told me to avoid overexertion. That's not part of what I agreed to." Her jaw kept tightening. Her breath came in short, sharp bursts. But she said nothing, because summer was long, and she still needed me. Even with Tyler, I stopped being the doting, all-giving grandmother. When he asked for an expensive toy, I knelt down and said gently, "Sweetheart, Grandma doesn't have that much money right now, and Daddy and Mommy work very hard too. We can't always buy everything we want." When he threw the toy on the floor in frustration, I didn't scold him. I just looked him in the eye. "Pick it up. Respect your toys, and the people who gave them to you." Slowly, I was planting seeds in this little boy's world. Seeds of boundaries, of gratitude, of respect. I couldn't change his parents, but maybe, just maybe, I could leave a small part of me in him. Something that would last longer than this summer. At first, Tyler didn't quite know what to make of this new version of Grandma. He seemed confused, torn between habit and hesitation, affection and fear. But kids are adaptable and instinctual. Within a few days, he was back to hovering around me, though he still occasionally repeated one of Claire's pre-approved lines. I knew it wouldn't be easy to change a child's worldview, especially with parents who fed him scripts. But I had to try. I used to be the all-in grandmother, always offering, always fixing things, before anyone even asked. Not anymore. Now, I was the contract grandmother. The job description was crystal clear childcare only. Cleaning, laundry, cooking, those were premium services. They cost extra, The days passed, and the deadline for the robotics camp loomed closer. $5,000 hung like a ticking clock in Mark and Claire's eyes. One night at dinner, Claire decided it was time for another strategic pitch. "Carol," she said, delicately spooning some food onto Tyler's plate, "this robotics camp is incredible. They have a professor from Germany, and so many kids have already signed up. It will really help Tyler's application to a good middle school." She watched me as she spoke, trying to read my face. Mark quickly chimed in, his tone urgent. "Yeah, Mom, the competition is fierce these days. We don't want Tyler to fall behind." I put down my chopsticks, nodded thoughtfully, and leaned in with apparent curiosity. "Oh, really? What do they teach? Who's the instructor? Where are the classes held? How many times a week?" I bombarded them with questions, sounding genuinely interested. They took the bait and launched into a string of details: coding, teamwork, international STEM programs, doing their best to sell it like marketing experts. When they finally paused for breath, I let the silence hang for a second, then sighed and said, "It sounds great, really, but $5,000? That's a fortune." I added a subtle frown for effect, just enough to imply it was perhaps too much for me. Then, casually, I changed the subject. "But you two have pretty decent jobs now, right? Didn't you just get that new car last year? And Claire, wasn't that a new designer bag you posted on Instagram recently? So that $5,000 shouldn't be much, right?" I took a sip of tea as their faces froze. Claire's lips thinned, and her skin paled slightly. Mark blinked a few times, as if searching for a response but finding nowhere to land. Inside, I was smirking, but on the outside, I remained calm and pleasant. "5,000, I repeated quietly. "That's not pocket change." Claire finally forced a smile, faint and bitter. "Mom, you know this is really important for Tyler. Mark and I are working so hard. We just want to give him a better future. We don't want you to pay for it." "Oh, I know," I nodded gently. "You both have good intentions. But I also know your finances. You bought a car. Claire, you just got a new bag, so $5,000 shouldn't be that much." They both flinched, just barely, but I caught it. Mark looked down. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. He stayed quiet. I raised my cup and took another slow sip. "My funds are already allocated," I said with a shrug, "all tied up. I really can't touch them. This is on you two." Their faces went stiff, as if a wall they had expected to walk through had just turned to steel. I gave them one last, gentle push. "You're the parents. It's your responsibility to invest in your child's future, not rely on someone else to carry that cost." Another silence settled over the kitchen, thick and uncomfortable. Mark's hand trembled slightly as he gripped his chopsticks. He looked at Claire, then back at me. After a moment, he finally spoke. "Okay, Mom, we'll figure it out." Claire said nothing. Her jaw was tight. Her chest rose and fell sharply once before she turned and stormed into the kitchen to clean. Lips pressed thin, back rigid, the sting of loss written in every movement. She knew she had lost this round, and that I was no longer the same easy target I once was. The next morning, right on time, I arrived at Mark and Claire's door. This time, not just as a grandmother, but as a woman with boundaries, clarity, and agency. In my hand, I held a contract I had drafted the night before. No more vague expectations, no more emotional blackmail, just a clear, fair agreement. Jenny opened the door, still wearing that tight, forced smile, like a mask about to crack. "Good morning, Carol," she chirped. I smiled back politely and handed her the folder. "This is the work agreement I drew up yesterday." She hadn't seen this coming. She took the papers and eyed them suspiciously. "Carol, what is this?" "It outlines our roles and responsibilities," I said, my voice calm and clear. "You and Mark are working, and I'm happy to help with Tyler during this camp period. But it's important that we're all on the same page. This is about respect, about protecting my time and energy, and making sure you know exactly what to expect from me." She was silent for a few seconds, scanning the pages. Every clause was deliberate and unambiguous. Childcare only, no laundry, no meal prep, no errands, clear hours, set schedule, days off, transportation expenses, reimbursed, overtime, requires advance notice and agreement. Her brow furrowed as she read the lines, her jaw tightening slightly. She didn't like it, but she also knew she couldn't refute it. Eventually, she passed the contract to Mark. The color drained from his face as he read, his fingers fiddling with the edges. "Mom," he mumbled, looking from the page to me. "What is this? Do we really need contracts for family?" I smiled gently. "I'm not asking for anything. I just want clarity. You're asking for my help, and I'm willing to give it. But I won't carry the whole house on my back again." "That's not helping. That's enabling." Mark and Claire exchanged glances. The tension swirled in the air between them like rising steam. But in the end, Mark sighed and conceded. "If this is what you want, we've signed." And just like that, the tone shifted. In the following days, everything fell into place. I arrived each morning, punctual and professional. I helped Tyler with his breakfast. I supervised his homework. I took him to the park. Everything aligned with the contract, nothing more, nothing less. Housework? Not my department. At dusk, I clocked out and went back to my motel for the night. Mark and Claire, perhaps reluctantly, didn't object. A new rhythm settled in, quiet and structured, but the tension lingered beneath the surface. Claire's anxiety began to seep out. She would watch me from across the kitchen as I stirred a pot, her eyes full of thoughts she couldn't seem to voice. Her lips would part slightly, then close again, the words retreating like waves pulling back from the shore. I noticed it all, but I said nothing, because I remembered all too clearly the months, the years, when I ran around this house like an unpaid maid. How she said nothing then. How she watched in silence as I wore myself down. Now she could sit in silence, just as I once did. By the second week of my return as the contract nanny, my routine had settled into a quiet rhythm. I clocked in at 8 o'clock each morning and out by 6 in the evening, like any professional. Tyler and I found our own rhythm too, a quiet, respectful bond with clear expectations. But I didn't let my world shrink to the four walls of Mark's house. Every afternoon, after lunch, I took Tyler to the community park. It was always bustling with movement, kids playing with bubbles, parents setting up picnic blankets, older couples taking slow laps around the lawn. At first, we were just a pair on the sidelines. But it didn't take long for the park regulars to notice. "Are you new around here?" An older woman with oversized sunglasses asked, her gray hair pinned up neatly. Her name was Margaret, a church volunteer and part-time community organizer. "Not exactly," I said with a smile. "I'm staying at the motel down the road, here for the summer to help my son with his boy." Her eyes lit up. "A motel? My, what a free life you're living." Another young mother chimed in, a toddler on her hip. "I thought you were a professional nanny," she said. "You're so loving with him, and Tyler listens so well." I just smiled. They asked how I kept Tyler entertained. I shared what I knew: how to use old newspapers to make paper puppets, how to turn pebbles into math games, how we used the park benches for storytelling practice. As I spoke, something shifted in their eyes. "You used to be a teacher, didn't you?" "No," I replied quietly. "But I raised him myself for 7 years, with time, with heart." Something about that made the small group fall silent for a moment. The next day, as soon as we entered the park, a few of them waved us over. One mother with 2 kids handed me a small flyer. "Our church is hosting a family volunteer day on Saturday. We'll be sorting donations and doing community work with the kids. Would you and Tyler like to come?" I took the flyer with a grateful nod. Turning back, Tyler looked at me curiously. "Grandma, what's a volunteer?" I knelt down to his level and spoke slowly. "It's when you give your time to help others, without expecting anything in return, just because it feels right." He nodded slowly, not quite understanding, but sensing the meaning. That evening at dinner, I brought it up casually. "On Saturday, I'm planning to take Tyler to a volunteer event at the church. Is that okay with you?" Claire's fork stopped mid-air. "The church?" she said, her voice tight. "Are you sure?" "Of course," I replied lightly. "It's completely safe, and I think it will be a good learning experience for him." She didn't answer, but her eyes said it all. On Saturday, we showed up as promised. Tyler and I sorted clothes, labeled boxes, and helped the other kids organize the shelves. Margaret praised his dedication, and a few moms took pictures for the church's Facebook group. That night, Claire came home looking tense. Apparently, one of her coworkers had seen the photos, especially the one of Tyler, standing proudly next to his pile of labeled boxes. It had gathered the most likes. Claire's smile was gone. "Mom, don't you think that's a bit much for him? He's only 7. "He had a good time," I said lightly, then turned to Tyler. "Didn't you, sweetie?" Tyler looked up from his blocks on the rug, his eyes bright. "Mommy, I helped with the clothes today. Grandma said we were doing a good thing." Claire didn't reply. She just disappeared into the kitchen. Over the next few days, something subtle shifted. People in the neighborhood started to recognize me. Some would say hello. Mothers started inviting us to sit nearby during picnics. The children started calling me Miss Carol. Tyler got used to our little daily excursions, too. He started asking if we could go out and help more often. As for me, I wasn't trying to replace Claire. I was just reclaiming myself, finding the version of me that thrived in the world, not just at someone else's kitchen sink. As for Claire, her initial unease morphed into a kind of quiet resentment. She stopped trying to challenge me directly, but the weariness on her face grew deeper each day. One evening, after dinner, Mark came over and handed me a glass of water. His voice was low, offhand. "The church thing. Thank you. Tyler's been different lately, in a good way." I nodded. No need to say more. But inside, I knew. The tide was turning. This wasn't just childcare anymore. This was influence. And I had only just begun to use it. It was a Wednesday afternoon. Crisp air. Golden light, the kind of fall day that settles into your skin like a sweet memory. After lunch, as usual, Tyler tugged on my sleeve. "Grandma, let's go to the park." I nodded, grabbing our jackets and a water bottle. As we stepped outside, he slipped his small hand into mine without a word. We walked slowly along the path by the lake. Tyler strayed onto the grass, kicking at the fallen leaves in no particular pattern, just the freedom of a child with no urgency. "Grandma?" he said suddenly, turning to look at me. "Do you remember where we picked up those acorns last time?" I blinked, surprised, but nodded. "Of course. You stuffed them all in my coat pocket and said you were going to grow an acorn tree." He giggled. "I thought it would grow by the next morning, and you told me we had to water it with milk." I smiled. "Who knew you'd believe me?" We walked and talked, not about anything profound, just snippets of shared memories. At one point, I said, "I remember the first time you had a fever. You scared me to death." He looked up. "Did I cry? Did you get any sleep that night?" I didn't answer. I just reached over and ruffled his hair gently. Back at the house, he didn't run for the television like he used to. Instead, he ran straight to his room. I was in the kitchen getting him some water when he called out, "Grandma, come here." I found him sitting on the floor, surrounded by paper and markers. He handed me a drawing. "This is for you. It's you and me." On the page, a grown-up held a child's hand under a big tree. The lines were crooked. The colors spilled over the edges, but it was perfect. "You said we used to come to this park before," he said quietly. I took the drawing and nodded. I didn't trust my voice enough to speak. Just then, the front door opened. Mark was home. "Daddy." Tyler ran to him, waving the paper. "I drew Grandma today." At the park, Mark took the drawing, looked at it, and said nothing. A few minutes later, he came over to me. His voice was low. "Mom, thank you. Tyler's been different lately, in a good way." I didn't reply. He hesitated for a moment, then added quietly, "I think I'm starting to understand how you raised him all those years." I met his eyes, my gaze calm and steady. "It's not too late to learn." That night, Tyler insisted I read him the same picture book 3 times in a row. Only when his eyes could barely stay open did he finally agree to go to bed. As I was tucking him in, he mumbled, "Grandma, can you move back in?" I smiled, pulling the blanket up to his chin. "Sweetheart," I whispered, "one day you'll grow up and you won't need your grandma by your side all the time." The light went out with a soft click. I stood in the doorway for a long time, watching him. He turned over in his sleep, his voice just a faint murmur in the dark. Grandma. It pulled at something deep inside me. But I said nothing. I just closed the door, quiet, steady, and slow. On Friday night, the house was unusually quiet. Tyler was in his room, coloring. I was sitting on the living room couch with a book, the television off, the kitchen silent, just the occasional chirp from outside breaking the silence. Claire came out of the kitchen and put the dishes in the sink. She didn't ask for my help like before. She didn't say a word. She just ran the water with her back to me. Mark was sitting at the dining table, not touching his phone. He looked at me, then at Claire, then back at me, as if trying to weigh something invisible. Finally, he spoke. Mom. I looked up, humming. He hesitated. Claire spoke. Tyler's been different lately, quieter. He plays by himself more. He says thank you now. I closed my book and nodded, my voice serene. That's good. He cleared his throat and lowered his voice, as if he didn't want the running water to drown him out. She's having a hard time with it. She thinks maybe you're doing it on purpose, getting him more attached to you, like it's a competition. I said nothing. I just looked at him. He continued. But I don't think that's it. I think she just feels like you see him. What does that matter? The water stopped. Claire turned around, a dishcloth in her hand, and snapped. So what? I don't see him. Is that what you're trying to say? Mark flinched. I didn't mean. She threw the towel onto the counter. Do you know what it's been like since she came back? She just does what she wants, and somehow she gets praised for it. I do the laundry, the meals, the logistics, and no one sees it. Claire. Mark tried to interrupt, but she was already gaining momentum. She wants to prove she's a better mother, that she's more lovable. And you, she pointed at Mark, her voice breaking, you're letting her. I didn't say a word. I didn't look at her. I didn't defend myself. I just sat there, my eyes fixed on the coffee table where Tyler's watercolor markers were scattered. I waited. Her anger bounced off the silence like fists against soft cotton. No sound, no resistance. Just stillness. Mark was quiet for a long time. Then, softly, maybe she just knows how to love people better. Everything stopped. Claire's mouth opened, then closed. She froze. Her shoulders trembled. Then she turned and walked away. The bedroom door clicked shut behind her, soft but final. The next morning, just before dawn, I checked out of the motel. Mark was already there, standing by my car with a white envelope in his hand. Mom, he said, his voice hoarse. I didn't sleep much last night. I didn't reply. He held out the envelope. It's not money. It's just a paper. I took it. I unfolded it. The handwriting was a little uneven, a little rushed. You were always our home. We just forgot what that meant. I folded it back up and nodded. Thank you, I said. He looked at me. Would you come back? Live with us again? I shook my head. Let's wait until Tyler is a little older, then we'll see. He didn't argue, he just nodded. Then, as I was turning to leave, he called out again. Mom, I stopped. I'm sorry it took me so long to stand by your side. I raised a hand and waved, wordlessly. There was no need. That night, back at the motel, my phone buzzed. A text from Claire. I'm sorry. I think I was too emotional and overreacted. I didn't really see things clearly before. No punctuation, no greeting, just a plain, crumpled line of text, like a balled-up piece of paper smoothed out. I didn't reply, but I didn't delete it either. On the last Friday in August, I neatly folded my few clothes and packed them into my suitcase. No goodbyes, no messages in the family chat, just like when I arrived, quiet, clean, no loose ends. Tyler was still asleep that morning. I didn't wake him. Instead, I opened his sketchbook to the page where we had drawn birds together. On the edge of the paper, I wrote in small, neat script, If you miss Grandma, draw something and mail it to me. Letters last longer than calls. I closed the suitcase. Outside the motel, Susan was already waiting in her car, window down, a smile as carefree as ever. "Got everything?" she said. "You didn't bring them their pots and pans too, did you?" I let out a soft laugh, took one last look at the neighborhood, and said nothing. When we got back to the country, the sky was just starting to lighten. The house was the same, red brick and 2 stories. Only now there were a few new mint plants in the garden, Susan's latest gardening experiment. As I hopped out of the car, she threw her arms open like a ringmaster announcing a show's return. "Look who's back, our fearless city warrior, returning home to retire in glory." I couldn't help but laugh. Dragging my suitcase inside felt less like an ending and more like arriving right where I needed to be. The kitchen smelled of hot oatmeal. A familiar snore came from the dog bed in the corner. Nothing had changed. And yet, somehow, everything had. Within a few days, I was back in my old rhythm. Mornings in the garden. Afternoons making jam. Sometimes a walk through the market with Susan, arm in arm. The pace was slow, but never empty. One crisp morning, the doorbell rang. "Mrs. Carol," the mailman said, holding out an envelope, "got a letter for you. Looks like it came from the city." I signed for it. The moment I saw the handwriting, my heart skipped crooked letters, carefully written. Tyler. I sat down at the small kitchen table and slowly opened it. A piece of stiff, crumpled cardstock slid out. A drawing. A small boy, holding hands with an older woman in a blue dress, stood under a tree. High up in the branches, 3 birds were taking flight. On the back, in shaky block letters, "Grandma, are you still making blueberry jam? I want to eat your bread again. My teacher told me to write about the most loving person I know. I wrote about you. I miss you." I didn't cry. I got up and walked to the refrigerator, pinned the drawing up with a magnet, holding down one corner. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows, lighting up the rows of jam jars along the sill. They glowed amber, like bottled sunshine. I opened a jar, still warm. I tasted a spoonful. It was sweeter than I remembered. Susan peeked in from the porch. "What's with that face?" she teased. "Let me guess, did someone write asking for money?" I looked up and smiled. "No, it's a reminder that I still matter." She raised an eyebrow. "Honey, you run this county. You're the CEO of Blueberry Humming." I laughed but didn't reply. Instead, I folded Tyler's letter and tucked it into the wooden box at the back of the kitchen drawer, the one where I kept the important things. Because getting older doesn't mean you lose your value. Sometimes it just means you're needed, in a different way.